As soon as my greedy son and his wife won $30 million in the lottery, they kicked me out. We don't need your pennies anymore. Get out! I smiled and said, Son, did you at least read whose name is on this lottery ticket? They looked more closely, and their faces turned pale. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from, or what time it is for you. If I fail today, I'll lose the last scraps of my dignity and the roof I sleep under. The bills arrive like a stack of accusations. Pale envelopes fanned on the coffee table between me and my son. Michael slaps one open with the back of his hand, slides a shut-off notice toward me so it bumps my knuckles. $300 for electric, $250 for gas, he says, his voice sharp as the crease in that paper. And groceries aren't free, Mom. Jennifer doesn't take her eyes off the television. Some audience laughs for a reason none of us here can feel. I fold my hands in my lap and count the rhythm of my breath. 42 years as a nurse taught me that trick. The pension covers what it covers, I say. Maybe it's time one of you found steady work. Jennifer turns at that. The talk show grin on the screen freezes while hers does not. You saying I don't try? Her tone has the edge I know from women who need to win before noon, just to make it through the afternoon. I'm saying the math keeps meeting us at the door. I look past her to the sagging curtain. Cold slips through anyway, no matter how you tuck it. Michael paces from kitchen to couch and back, a metronome for resentment. Your $1,200 barely makes a dent, he says, and he taps the notice again with his fingernail. We're drowning and you sit there like it's fine. I worked, I say, and I keep my voice steady. I worked a lifetime. I sold my house to help you buy this one. That down payment wasn't a favor. That was my retirement. That was 3 years ago, he snaps. Things change. He's right about that. The house that used to be mine smelled like lemon oil and Sunday gravy. This one smells like reheated casserole and a fight that hasn't started yet. Jennifer stands, blocking the lamplight, so I'm looking at her silhouette. We appreciate it, she says. And appreciation lands heavy as a coin tossed from a balcony. But it doesn't mean you get to live here free. Free. I taste the word. Find it empty. I cover groceries and I pay what I can on utilities. I don't mention the little I put toward a cable package I don't watch, or the slivers I slip into the jar by the stove for things like dish soap and the coffee they like. What we need is real money, Michael says. He reaches into his wallet, rummaging with a rattling impatience. He pulls out a crumpled $5 bill and pushes it at me with theatrical disgust. Here, go to the corner store on Morrison Street and buy a couple scratchers or a state lotto quick pick. Maybe you'll finally be useful. Somewhere in the television, someone wins a new car, and the audience claps like thunder. In our living room, the quiet after his sentence is longer. I take the $5. The paper is soft from passing through other hands, edges feathered by a dozen counters. There's the faint grease of a diner register on one corner. Thank you, I say, because old women learn how to wear thank you like a coat in a storm. Jennifer smirks. Don't get the dollar ones. Big jackpot tonight. Get the $5 quick pick, Michael says as if he hasn't already decided what I'll say. Better odds. Odds. I know something about odds. A lifetime of punching a clock isn't much, but an agreement with odds. If you show up, you get by. If you keep your head down, you keep your job. If you raise a child on night shifts and double shifts and sell the only house you ever owned to help him, maybe you don't end up the line item that kills the budget. Beautiful day for a walk, I say to no one in particular, which is one of the few advantages of being my age. You get to say true things, even if they sound like lies. Outside, Pacific Northwest November sits heavy on the roofs, sky the color of a dull blade. The cold lifts the sleep from my eyes and puts it on my cheeks. I turn my collar up and let my feet find the sidewalk the way they found the hospital for decades. Left, right, keep moving. 3 blocks down, Laurelhurst Park holds a thin skin of ice on the pond. A few stubborn geese along the edge, muttering like old women on a bench. A shut-off notice peeks from my pocket. I didn't bring it, but it came along anyway. A stray dog of a thought that follows whether you feed it or not. At the Quick Mart, the bell over the door does its little chiming dance as if every entrance is a celebration. A young woman in a blue polo looks up and nods. She knows my name because she has the kind of memory people mistake for kindness. On my better days, I believe it's both. "Evening, Mrs. Collins," she says. Her name tag reads Sarah, and she's as steady behind that counter as an old clock. Cold one. "Getting colder," I answer. The state lotto display flashes its LEDs like a strip of carnival lights. Posters promise whatever you need them to. I study the machine like it can take a hint. One quick pick in Michael Collins' name, I say, clear as a church bell, and 2 in mine. Sarah doesn't blink. She types. The printer purrs and the slips spool out with their neat rows of numbers, barcodes like little guardrails at the bottom. She feeds the first into a sleeve, prints the name, Michael Collins, hands it to me, then 2 more, Barbara Collins. Barbara Collins. I pay with the 5 from my son and a 10 from my own cracked leather wallet. "Jackpot's big tonight," Sarah offers. "That so?" I slide one ticket into my shirt, pocket like a note from an old friend, and tuck the other, 2 beside my Medicare card and the photograph of my husband when he was 30, and the son loved him as much as I did. Bigger than trouble. She laughs. "Genuine depends who's asking." Fair enough. On the walk back, the air bites sharper. Streetlights blink awake and paint puddles of amber on the cracked pavement. At a kitchen window I pass. A mother leans over homework, her finger underlining a math problem, like a promise. Another window shows a teenager stirring a pot, while a man checks his watch, all of them inside their own stories. None aware I'm writing a line that might change mine. Inside the house, the warmth is ordinary, but the mood is colder than the sidewalk. Jennifer sprawls with a bag of chips balanced on her stomach. Michael wipes the counter like he's mad at the crumbs. I set the 3 slips on the coffee table. "Quick picks," I say. "Drawing at 8. Michael eyes the tickets. Then me. "We'll finally get some return on investment," he says. And his smile is a blade. I go to my room and sit on the edge of a bed I bought with my own money. A modest thing, firm enough to remind me I'm alive in the morning. I open my wallet and look at the 2 slips with my name printed in block letters. Same numbers as his, same date, stamped plain as sunrise. I'm not a gambler. I'm a woman who believes in keeping receipts. The hours between now and 8 pass like cold molasses, slow but mean. I read the local paper I've already read once. I sort the pillbox for the week. I listen to the furnace kick on and off. When I come back down, the tickets still sit on the coffee table where I left them, nestled among junk mail and ads for tile installers and a pizza special we can't afford. The state lotto drawing opens with a smile that's too white for winter. Balls bounce in a transparent drum while the host talks about dreams. I've learned that dreams are loudest in rooms without enough chairs. Michael sits forward, all cruelty suddenly converted into superstition. Jennifer snorts that she doesn't care, then leans in anyway. "First number," the host says, reaching into the drum. 7. 7. Michael reads from the slip, and his voice jumps a note. "Okay." The second number, 23. "Got it," he says. 2 for 2. The third number finds us all sitting up straighter. 31. That's 3. Jennifer's fingers drum the arm of the couch. No way. I don't speak. I'm counting more than the numbers now. I'm counting breaths the way a woman does when she sees a storm cloud stand up and walk toward her. 42, the host says, cheerful as a morning radio ad. Michael stands without realizing he's stood. 4, 58. His lips form the number twice before air finds his throat. That's 5. And tonight's state lotto ball, the host sings. is 12. We all look down. Him, then me, then Jennifer, and the living room tightens to the size of a slip of paper. Michael's eyes fill with the kind of light I've seen in people who've been touched by a miracle and choose to call it theirs. We won, he says, breathless, laughing, crying. Oh my God, we won. Jennifer is on her feet, clutching at his shoulders, spinning him once in a messy kitchen waltz. She whoops and knocks the bag of chips to the floor. Salt scatters under her shoes like beach sand that never saw an ocean. 30 million, he chants because the host said it, and cash has a way of printing itself across people's tongues. They tumble through promises. New house, new cars, Florida in winter, Italy in spring. A boat big enough to throw parties for people they don't like. Their laughter fills the room I paid a third of with what used to be my life. Then I watch the calculation come in on Michael's face, quiet as fog. He looks at me, then at the ticket in his hand, then at me again. This changes everything, he says, and his voice loses its sugar. Jennifer hears it too. She straightens, puffs herself up so her chest arrives a second before she does. It means we don't have to carry dead weight, she says to the air. But the air isn't who it hits. Dead weight, I repeat, and the words don't taste like anything. I've been a lot of things in my life. Wife, mother, nurse, woman who shows up. I've never been cargo. Pack a bag, Mom, Michael says. And he's trying to put sympathy into it, but only finds relief. We'll help you find a place that suits your needs. We can even pay the first month. It's better for everyone. For a long second, I just look at the slip of paper in his hand. The numbers are tiny moons. The name above them is printed in clear black letters. You sure? I ask. It's the best thing, Jennifer says. And this time, she means it. Then I guess I'll get my suitcase, I say. The house hums with their excited planning, while I climb the stairs that have never quite felt like mine. My room is small and square and clean. On the dresser, there's a framed photo. My husband in a button-down shirt, cheeks flushed from laughing. My son as a boy on my shoulders, hands in my hair like a crown. Me younger and broader and stunned with gratitude. I hardly knew how to carry. I wrap the photo in a t-shirt and tuck it between socks. I add 3 shirts, 2 pairs of pants, underwear enough to get me through a week, blood pressure pills, metformin, the little notepad where I write down questions for my doctor so I don't forget them. I slide my wallet into my inside jacket pocket and pat it once to feel the 3 slips inside, 1 in Michael's name, 2 in mine. I zip my bag and let the sound of the teeth finding one another hand in for everything I'm not saying. Downstairs, Michael meets me in the hall with a champagne flute in one hand and the winning ticket in the other. His smile is bright and brittle, windshield glass in sunlight. Well, he says, lifting the glass like a toast. This is good for all of us. You'll be happier somewhere with people your own age. I suppose that's one way to look at it. He glances down at the ticket, then up at me, then down again, as if something is itching under the ink. I hold out my hand, palm up like I'm asking for a pen. Son, I say, and the word feels like a porch light left on in a storm. Did you read the name on that slip? What? He frowns. Defensive at first because defense is muscle memory. It's ours. Read it. He brings it close to his face. The hallway light catches the gloss. Jennifer steps behind him, impatient, weight shifting from foot to foot. Read it. I repeat. Softer. Barbara Collins, he whispers, and a color leaves his face I've never seen go before. He looks up and meets my eyes, and for a breath I see the child who used to hold my hand crossing a street. Mom, what is this? That, I say, and I gesture to the rectangle that's been sweating in his grip for the last 10 minutes. Is my ticket. Bought with my money. Your ticket is on the coffee table with your name on it, and a handful of numbers that don't much matter. Jennifer lunges a half step. then stops. "You can't do this," she says, voice climbing a ladder towards something that could tip either way. "We've been celebrating." "You've been celebrating the idea of money," I say. "Easy mistake. Ideas are lighter than facts." She clenches her hands, opens them, clenches again. I keep my eyes on hers and my voice calm. "One more step toward me and we'll invite the police to admire your self-control," I add. And the words settle her faster than a hand on a shoulder would. The fear of a report is an old fear in a lot of women. "She's one of them. Mom," Michael says. "And now the please is trying to be born. We can work this out. We can share. We didn't mean what we said about, you know." "You meant every word," I say, not unkindly. "That's the benefit of excitement. It tells the truth. Share." I nod toward the coffee table. "You didn't want to share a thermostat setting. You won't like sharing a windfall." Tears wobble and spill down his cheeks. They make him look younger, which hurts more than anything else in this house. "I'm sorry." "I know," I say. I believe him, and I don't, which is how it is with apologies that arrive after the cake is cut. I take the slip from his fingers, slow and plain. I fold it once and slide it into the wallet beside the other two. I shoulder my bag. The old zipper sighs like a dog settling in for a nap. "Where will you go?" he asks. "Somewhere quiet," I say. "Somewhere I can hear myself think." I look back at the shut-off notice on the table. Due date circled in red. Penalty already calculated to the penny. "I'll have the utilities office call you," I add, because clean breaks are kinder in the long run than half measures. "You won't need my check this month." The cold outside is honest. November air doesn't pretend it's anything but what it is. My breath ghosts in front of me as I walk down the drive, with a suitcase in one hand and a coat collar tucked high. Behind me, a television laughs, and then someone closes a curtain. I carry my life into the night. A small bag, a picture wrapped in cotton, a wallet with 3 pieces of paper in it. One will buy the next chapter. The other 2 are there as proof that I've finally learned what to keep. The roadway lodge on the highway does not smell like home, but it smells like clean. The clerk doesn't ask questions I don't want to answer. $69 buys me 2 beds and a heater that works. I sit on the edge of one, take out the ticket, and lay it on the coverlet like a delicate tool. I read my name, the numbers, the date, the promise. My hand shakes just enough to make the letters shimmer. I've held newborns with steadier fingers. Money can do that to a woman. So can relief. I laugh once, quiet and short, the sound of a valve releasing. Tomorrow will be paperwork and phone calls and a choice. I'm already leaning toward a lump sum that buys time instead of years of checks, that promise a future you might not live to spend. I'll ask about staying off the press release and keeping my phone mine. I'll figure out what neighborhood might feel like a place where an old woman can sit with a book and a cup of coffee without being told her chair costs too much. For now, I pull the motel curtains together and let them fall. The heater sighs. Somewhere out on the highway, a semi downshifts and climbs. I whisper a good night to a man I loved a long time and always, and I picture a small kitchen where he would have stood with a cup of tea and watched the rain and said, "Look at that, Barbara. Look at that quiet." I climb into a bed that doesn't remember me and sleep like a woman who has chosen her own door. I wake before the heater kicks back on. The room blurs with the kind of morning that doesn't care if you slept. For a moment, I'm not in a motel. I'm 40 years younger in a hospital break room, and kneading the ache out of my hands while a supervisor counts minutes like they're pills. Then the heater coughs once, and the present corrects me. The ticket lies where I left it, inside a plain envelope tucked into the Bible's hollow beside the nightstand. I take it out and read my name again, the numbers marching in a line like good soldiers. I sign the back in steady blocks, BARBARACOLLINS, then print the date and slip the thing into a stiff plastic sleeve I bought years ago for my Husband's recipe card for lemon bars. I set the sleeve on the desk and take a breath that measures as relief and fear in almost equal parts. On the pad of motel stationery, I write a list in pencil. When your life has spent itself on routines, you learn that a list is a ladder out of panic. Photograph. Ticket front and back. Call Lottery Claims Center. Ask for options. Lump sum, anonymity, timing, safe deposit box. Fireproof safe. Both. Receipts. Get store transaction. Ask about camera footage. Notary for an affidavit from the clerk. Consult an attorney. Choose one who listens more than talks. New phone number. P.O. box. Remove my name from utilities. Close loops clean. I use the old flip phone for pictures. Slow and grainy, but fine. I take one with a ruler beside the ticket, and one with the motel alarm clock in the frame in case anyone later decides to argue time. I put the photos onto the little SD card, then tuck the card into the coin pocket of my jeans, the pocket where dimes used to jingle when payphones were an answer to more problems than they are now. The lottery's claims number lies on the back of the ticket. A woman answers with a voice you'd trust to remind you to bring a sweater. I give only what I have to. First name, initial of last, city. The 6 numbers. She asks me to hold. A minute later, her tone shifts into the carefulness of people who know they're part of a turning point in someone else's life. Mrs. C, she says, you'll want to secure the ticket somewhere safe and avoid showing it around. We'll schedule a claims appointment. You can bring counsel. You may decline publicity. Some winners choose a trust. We can give you general information, but we don't provide legal advice. I won't ask you for any, I say. Just the next step. She offers me 2 appointment slots, one late this week, one next, and I take the later. It gives me time to make copies, to buy the kind of quiet you can stack between you and other people's plans. She reminds me to bring identification, the ticket, and patience for signatures. I write it down even though I won't forget. After the call, I take the envelope and my list to the office for coffee that tastes like the same pot in every motel on every highway. The clerk at the desk gives me a wave without looking, up from a crossword. I buy a roll of packing tape, a thick brown envelope, and a flat mailer from the little rack of travel things people pretend they won't need. I ask if I can use their copier. 2 pages free, he says. And for once, 2 is enough for what matters. A life measured in small economies turns you into an archivist, whether you meant to be one or not. I tape a copy of the ticket image to my list and write copy across it in fat pencil, then slide both into the flat mailer with the motel receipt and yesterday's newspaper. I address the parcel to myself at a P.O. box I don't yet have, then stop and fix that. There's a post office open by 8. It takes 20 minutes, and the memory of my husband's dislike of clutter to choose a small box in a row of thousands. I spin the combination a second time after I set it, because faith and habit both tell me to. By 9:30, I'm at the store under the bell that sings at every entrance. The bell never changes its mind. Sarah looks up and the recognition in her eyes cracks into something like relief. "Morning, Mrs. Collins," she says. "Wasn't sure I should... Well, congratulations, if that's the word you want." "It's a word," I say. "Thank you." She leans her elbows on the counter like she's shelving some of the formality. "I kept my mouth shut," she adds, and I believe her. Sarah is plain in the way that's hardest to fake. I appreciate that. I need a favor too, actually. I slide a folded sheet across the counter. On it, I've written the time and the register number from my receipt, and my request in block letters. Duplicate of transaction record if possible. Copy of camera footage showing purchase if policy allows. A witness statement if you're willing. Sarah reads it from the top, then flips it like there might be more on the back. "I can print a transaction log," she says. "Footage is the manager's call. He's in after lunch." "I can wait," I say, meaning I can come back. As for the statement, just a paragraph saying you sold me 2 quick pics in my name and 1 in my son's. Paid with my money. I'll have it notarized so it's more than a story. Her mouth tightens at the word son, but she nods. I saw you pay, she says simply. And I typed the names myself. I'll write it down. Sarah prints the transaction record, and the paper spits out with the indifference of machines that do their job, whether or not the job matters. I fold the printout into thirds, slip it into the same plastic sleeve as the ticket copy, then hand her a crisp 20 for the trouble. She tries to hand it back. I leave it on the counter and buy a pack of pens. Back after lunch, I tell her. Back after lunch, she echoes. And I like that about her, that she mirrors a woman without making her feel small for asking. In the hours between, I walk the kind of errands that stitch a new life together. At the phone store, I buy a cheap smartphone in a plain color and put it on a plan that won't ask questions or make me feel like I lost an argument. I keep the old flip with its battered number for a while. There are doctors and a pharmacy who know that one, and a woman learns to widen her own bridges instead of blowing them up. At the bank, just the bank, because names stick to institutions like burrs, I ask about a safe deposit box. The woman at the desk wears a blouse the color of late summer corn and speaks with the calm of someone who sells safety, like bread. I pick a medium box and sign forms that talk about access as if it's a relative with a key. I'll be storing important documents, I say. Nothing perishable, nothing illegal. That covers most things. She answers with a smile that's part professionalism, part pity for lives more complicated than hers. She shows me to a vault room that feels like a library for secrets. I lay the plastic-sleeved copies inside alongside the little SD card and the statement Sarah hasn't written yet. The original ticket stays with me until the claim appointment. I wear it under my shirt in a pouch I make out of an old handkerchief. A ridiculous talisman that works because I say it does. The attorney comes from a recommendation written on a yellowing card in my wallet. A woman I worked with had used him to sort out a sister's estate. His office sits over a coffee shop that hasn't changed its window decal in 2 generations, which I take as a good sign. The name on the glass reads David Morrison in simple letters shaped to be forgotten by anyone not looking for them. He meets me himself. No parade, no billing of minutes. Middle-aged, hair trimmed back to get the work done. He listens to the short version without scribbling more than a few notes. You did well to sign the ticket and photograph it, he says finally. You did better to make a copy and not carry the original around like a parade float. There are 2 usual paths for claiming, as yourself or through a trust. Privacy matters to you. It matters more than a new car, I say. I want my quiet more than I want a bigger TV. Then we'll form a simple trust, he says. It can be revocable. We'll name you the trustee. Keep the beneficiary definition plain. We'll ask the lottery to issue the money to the trust. You can decline press and refuse to have your picture taken with a comically large check. I nod. I've never cared for comically large anything. He smiles at that, then turns his legal pad to show me an outline as clean as carpentry. Create trust. Secure tax guidance. Prepare claim packet. Attend appointment. Deposit funds with a bank that will assign you an actual human to call when something breaks. Between now and then, he says, don't make any gifts or promises until the account's established and the tax picture is clear. You'll be surprised how many second cousins you acquire between now and then. I won't be, I say. I've already heard from 1 or 2 who used to live in my house. David's face doesn't change, which earns him more of my trust. He doesn't pry. He just circles a line on his pad. You don't owe anyone explanations, he says. You owe institutions signatures. For everyone else, you owe only the boundaries you keep. We draft the trust on paper that smells faintly of ink and good decisions. He reads it aloud to me once, then again slower until I can hear my husband's voice in the spaces. Would he be all right with this? Yes. He would be all right with a choice that meant coffee without a fight, and winter in a house where the heat works when you ask it to. David prints a letter for the lottery, asking that all contact run through his office. He tucks my copy into a folder with a brass fastener and hands it to me like a baton. "When your son calls," he says, "not if. You can refer him to me. We'll say what's true. You're handling your affairs with counsel. If he is respectful, we'll honor that. If he isn't, we won't engage. Does that fit you? It fits me like my old jacket." It does. The new smartphone vibrates in my pocket as I'm paying his retainer with a cashier's check, pulled from the bank upstairs. I don't check the screen until I'm on the sidewalk. 6 missed calls resolve into 3 messages, each from a number I know by heart. I find a bench under a bare tree and listen with my thumb over the speaker. The first message is all laughter, and we, the way people hold out empty hands and wait for you to fill them. "Mom, Jennifer says we should all drive to the lottery office together. It's only right. We'll tell them. We'll make sure it's fair." The second is sugar that's begun to crystallize. If you insist on doing this your way, maybe we can talk about how to divide things later. You know we've supported you. The third is a hook without bait. If you shut us out, it's fraud. We'll say you stole the ticket. We'll tell the store. We'll tell everyone. People will believe us. I set the phone down on the bench beside me and watch an old dog tug his owner toward a convenience store that smells faintly of warm bread. Threats don't surprise me. They're just the other end of a hand that had been asking. I press the phone to my ear again and leave a message in reply. I keep my voice even the way I did when I told women half my age not to lift more than their back could carry. "Michael," I say, "I love you. Here are the facts. You told me to leave. I left. The winning ticket has my name on it. I bought it with my money. And I have the receipt and the store clerk's statement and copies of everything, with dates on them. I've hired counsel. If you want to speak with him, I'll text you his office number. If you threaten me again, we'll end the conversation. I wish you peace and some time to think. I won't be answering every call. I don't tell him about the trust or the appointment date. That information lives where it should, with me and my attorney, and the piece of paper that's taught me what is mine to keep." After lunch, I go back to the store. The bell gives me its choir boy welcome. Sarah lifts a hand to say 1 minute and disappears through the swinging door to the back. When she returns, she's carrying a manila envelope with a label that makes my chest loosen a notch. For Mrs. C, she opens it and lays out the contents like tools on a cloth. Her handwritten statement, the printed transaction record, a note from the manager agreeing to preserve the camera footage for 30 days, pending any official request, and a phone number to reach him if anyone needs to pick up a copy. "I wrote what I saw," Sarah says. She taps the page. "You paid. I typed your name and your son's name. I watched you put 2 slips in your wallet and put his on the counter. You didn't act like a woman looking over her shoulder." "Thank you," I say. "You want me to add anything for you?" "A tip beyond the one you didn't want." I gesture to the pens in my shirt pocket. She shakes her head. "If anyone asks me something official, I'll answer the same way I wrote it," she says. "I won't be bullied. Comes up more than you'd think." "More than I'd like," I say. We walk 2 blocks to a notary. Just a woman in a storefront that frames passport photos for kids who look like they're joining the Navy. She stamps and signs, and for $20 and a scroll on a ledger, Sarah's words graduate into paper. People don't treat like gossip. She won't take my money after that. But I buy her a coffee and drink mine beside her on the curb. She tells me about her mother's arthritis and her plan to save enough to visit family, 3 states away. We speak in small truths that add up to more than they sound like. I ship the flat mailer from the post office to my new P.O. box, postmarked, dated, stamped in the kind of ink that doesn't lie. I make a second envelope for David with copies of everything, and drop it through the brass slot in his door with a note that says, "In case I forget where I put things." By late afternoon, the air has sharpened enough to put color in people's faces. I walk without aim through blocks that are not yet my home and maybe never will be, past a barber leaning in toward an old woman's ear with a story, past a girl kicking ice to see the white break into sugar. I pass a thrift store and go in because I'm the kind of woman who believes in the dignity of second chances for objects. I buy a used fireproof box with a working key and a coat with a lining that keeps the wind honest. The woman at the register throws in a handful of hangers like a blessing. Back in the motel room, I set the fireproof box in the corner where the wall meets the dresser and put the original ticket inside for the first time. I lock the box and set the key on a string around my neck beneath my shirt, so it sits where a locket would on a younger woman. I place my shoes beside the bed the way my mother taught me. Facing out, ready. The new phone buzzes on the dresser. A text from a number I don't know flashes up in a bubble. "Heard you hit it big. Congrats. If you need advice, I can manage the whole thing for a small fee." The message is signed with a name that tries too hard. I block the number and realize I'll be doing that until my patience runs out or the interest does. I plug both phones in, old and new, because some bridges are in the process of being replaced rather than torn down. I sit on the bed and open the notebook I carried out of my house. On the first clean page, I write, "What does a quiet life look like if you can afford it?" Then I make another list, the gentler kind. A small kitchen that knows the weight of a cast-iron pan, a chair by a window that sees morning, a good doctor who looks you in the face, not at a screen, a hair salon where they remember your last cut by the way your hair lies, not by a file, a pocket of town where a woman can walk to things she needs, a library card the clerk slides across the desk like a handshake. I add after a pause a line I underlined twice. No revenge purchases. No revenge, period. The old phone rings. Not the son. The number belongs to a friend from the hospital I haven't seen in months because her knees went and then COVID went through her house like an uninvited guest. I let it go to voicemail and listen. After. "Barbara," she says, breath whistling like a kettle through a kitchen with too much steam. "I heard a rumor from my sister's friend who plays bingo with someone who knows your boy. If it's true, I don't want anything but to tell you I'm happy for you. And that if you need a place for a week, our couch folds out. Helen says we'll put fresh sheets on it this time." I call her back. We talk about the weather, as if weather hasn't been the most reliable companion we have. I don't confirm anything about numbers or tickets. I talk about coffee and knees, and the show we'll pretend to watch next month. Before we hang up, she says, "Don't let it make you weird." I tell her that ship sailed long before money got involved. Evening writes itself against the window. I heat the cup of motel room soup by pouring boiling water over the dehydrated everything and sit on the bed with the plastic spoon and the television dark. Without the TV, the room sounds like a machine resting. The heater's slow breath, the hum behind the mini-fridge, the wind putting a shoulder into the seam of the window and thinking better of it. The old phone bleats again. One text, then another, then 10. I turn the phone face down and let the buzzing peter out. Somewhere inside, a younger version of me wants to answer every accusation, defend motives I haven't even formed. The woman I am now turns the page of the notebook and writes in the same block letters I used on the back of the ticket. I don't owe anyone a performance. Late, I take the ticket out of the box and look at it one last time, not to admire it, to get used to the idea that it's a tool, not a trophy. Tools fix things. Trophies sit there and gather weird dust. Tomorrow I'll go back to the bank and put the original in the safe deposit box until the appointment. I will bring only what can be carried without a heart attack. The letter from David, copies of the documents, my ID, and the slow pulse of a woman who has outlasted winters before and knows how layers work. Before I sleep, I call the utilities office and remove my name from the gas and electric. The woman on the line says, "Are you sure?" And I say, "Very." She tells me there is a final bill with my portion. I tell her to send it to the new P.O. box and add a $10 tip to the payment when I make it. Useless and necessary as a ceremony. After I hang up, I picture my son in the kitchen I helped buy, standing inches from the thermostat like it insulted him. I hope he turns it up because he's cold, not to prove a point. When I finally turn off the lamp, my eyes adjust to the motel dark. A different thickness than house dark, flavored with neon from the highway, and a soft glow from the smoke. Detective's steady red eye. I count breaths the way I did in my daughter-in-law's living room and in hospital corridors. When the waiting is louder than the news, I count until the numbers let go of my throat. Sometime in the night, the new phone buzzes against the wood. I don't get up. The heater hums. The road outside keeps taking people where they said they needed to go. The list on the desk holds down its corner of the world. And the ticket sleeps in a small lockbox like it's learning how to be. Just paper again. In the morning, I walk the original ticket to the bank and put it to bed in the vault. Steel door, 2 keys, the quiet that lives with combinations. I leave with copies, a nervous system worth of paperwork, and the lightness you get when you've tied down what wind can lift. By 9, I've had 2 cups of motel coffee and done my exercises against the wall, like the physical therapist taught me. Slow squats, a stretch for the hamstrings that looks like prayer if you don't know better. I'm lacing my shoes when the new phone buzzes with a text from Sarah. Heads up. Night clerk's cousin posted something dumb. Not me. People asking questions. The words dry my mouth faster than the coffee. I call her. "It's some local news page," she says, voice tight. Video clip of our sign. "Winner sold here." And then the cousin adds, "A regular older lady." Real quiet. I think her name is Barbara. She swallows. I can hear it. She deleted it, but not before screenshots. Manager chewed her out 2 times. How many people saw it? "Enough," she says. "Thank you," I say. And because gratitude needs more than words, you did right to tell me. "I'm sorry," she says. "You didn't do it." We hang up. On the TV, a weather map glows with arrows and temperatures. All the attention pointed at a front 1,000 miles wide. I turn it off. Somewhere in the room, the small fireproof box keeps its calm like a dog who has learned to nap through storms. I call David. He answers on the second ring. I hear a printer in the background, the scratch of his pen across something weighty. "I can move your claim appointment to a different office," he says after I explain. "It's an extra hour's drive, but the lobby is bigger and the press can't predict which door you'll use. Also, we can add a simple request. All communications through counsel. No comment on the identity of the claimant. They'll respect that more if the request comes printed on letterhead." "Do that," I say. "And I need to move motels today." "Use cash," he says. "Different town if you can swing it. Don't tell anyone where until the claim is done and the funds are in your hands. And Barbara, yes, don't underestimate how quickly a small rumor turns into a parade." I sit on the edge of the bed, the motel blanket rough under my palms. I've lived through a few. I'll take side streets. Before I leave, the old phone rings. I let it go to voicemail. Then I turn it off and tape a sticky note across the screen that says in block letters, "For emergencies only." A woman can't be her own worst temptation every hour and expect to keep her balance. I check out. The desk clerk, same crossword as yesterday, different shirt. Doesn't look up when he slides the receipt into the little plastic folder. The door breathes cold onto my cheeks. In the parking lot, a car I don't recognize idles too long and then pulls out as I step into the wind. Paranoia is a shape that fits easily. Over your shoulders when people start saying your name, without asking. "Permission! There's a bus into Selwood every hour. Workers, shoppers, old women with their newspapers, teenagers with earbuds escaping towns they don't yet know they'll miss." I buy a ticket with cash and sit near the back where the heat collects. The bus hums like a patient animal. At certain corners, winter-capped heads turn and glance at the snow line on the grass, measuring how far it's traveled toward them. Selwood smells like water and bread, a bakery close to the river, a marina to remind you that waves keep their own calendar. The bus lets me off at a street with narrow houses and bare maples that look like honest, handwriting scribbled across the sky. Walk past a shop that repairs watches and also, apparently, violins, a hair salon, a storefront church with a sign promising coffee and forgiveness. 2 blocks down, a small board on a curb reads, "Studio apartment, month-to-month clean quiet call." The numbers taped below it on little flags you can tear off. I pull one, then another for luck and dial. A man answers with the voice of someone who's been disappointed by more tenants than he can remember and keeps trying anyway. "Can show it in 15 minutes, he says. "But I only rent to quiet, tidy people without dogs who think they count as cats." "I'm tidy," I say, "and dogless." He laughs once. That's a start. His name is Thomas. He's late 50s, hair pulled back, keys jangling like a small wind chime on his belt. I count him as a person, not a character. I don't need more names in my life right now. We walk around back to a garage with a second story tucked above it. A kind of practical nest. Woman who had it got divorced, he says. Her ex wasn't thrilled about walking up wooden stairs in February. "I painted yesterday. You'll need a toaster. It's simple. A narrow kitchen. A bathroom that could hold a woman and her bad knee at the same time if they negotiate. A main room with a window that looks over the alley to a strip of sky where the river appears like a silver stripe when the wind sits down. The heat works. The floor doesn't complain. Thomas talks rent that won't ruin me. First month in cash. Deposit tomorrow when I go to the bank. I tell him I can move in this afternoon with a suitcase and a small box that holds more paper than anything else. "You a reader?" he asks, eyeing the notebook under my arm like it might escape. "Trying to be one again." He nods, satisfied with the answer. "Trash day is Thursday," he says. "Don't make me come find you if you forget." I sign a month-to-month with my real name. Hiding behind something false has never looked good on me. He hands me 2 keys and a smile at half power. "Welcome home," he says, like a test. On the way to buy sheets and a toaster from a store that sells exactly those things and a few others, the old phone lights back up as if it senses I've been ignoring it. I step into a doorway to listen. The first message is Michael's voice, ragged from crying or winning. I still can't tell the difference at a distance. "Mom, please. We didn't mean..." "I didn't. This is all happening so fast." The second is Jennifer, her tone pitched toward legal menace and family outrage in equal portions. "You can't hide. The store will say what happened. Everyone knows you bought him a ticket. We'll talk to the news." I forward both to David without comment. He replies with a short text. "I'll handle it. You don't have to." For the first time since the drawing, my shoulders drop a notch in my coat. Back at the garage apartment, I open the window to air out the paint, and the river sends a taste of tin into the room. The almost snow smell that hangs over cities like a story about to be told. I make a sandwich on the counter, standing. Heel of bread, mustard line thinner than habit would like. I eat the second half just to prove I don't have to ration anymore. By late afternoon, I want to see Sarah before I vanish again. Not to say goodbye. Nobody ever says it well. But to close the loop and thank her with my eyes instead of just my voice. I take the next bus back. The Quick Mart looks the same, which is one of the reasons I trust it. Its sameness is not an act. But there's an extra car in the lot with a magnet on the door. Local news in red letters. A woman stands near the entrance with a microphone stuck to a wire, her breath blooming into the air in little fast puffs. A man with a camera on his shoulder keeps shifting his weight to keep his toes warm. I stop at the edge of the lot and pull my hat lower. Being looked at suddenly feels like being asked to pay a bill. I skirt behind the building. The back door sits beside a dumpster that smells like vegetable regret. I knock once, then again. A second later, the door opens a crack. "Don't say my name," Sarah mutters, grinning despite herself. "You want in?" "Just a minute," I say. She lets me wait in the sliver of warmth between the back room and the stock shelves. It smells like orange cleaner and cardboard ink, the practical perfume of things organized to fit. "Reporters came by twice," she says. "Manager told them nothing. The cousin who posted the hint cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes. I feel bad for her and I don't, which is my least favorite kind of feeling. People do foolish things when the promise of a story gets into their blood," I say. "I know a few who've done worse for less." She tips her head toward the front window. Through a slice between chip displays, I can see a shape I know. Michael, face flushed, hair down, anger up. He's pointing at the counter. Beside him, Jennifer fills space like it's a job. She slaps the counter once, then spreads her hands in a performance of reason that misses its mark. "Lord," Sarah says softly. "I'm going out the way I came in," I say. "Tell your manager I'm grateful he kept his policy. Tell the cousin this will be a story in a week." That makes her roll her eyes at herself in 10. She reaches under the counter for a knit cap from Lost and Found. "It's black and anonymous. Take this," she says. "People see what they expect. They're expecting a woman in your hat." I pull it down low and feel a little ridiculous and mostly protected. She sticks out her hand. I shake it. "We are not the kind of women who hug easily, but we stand near it for a second. Be well," she says. "You too." I slip out the back. On the sidewalk, a woman in a heavy jacket smokes with the kind of concentration that says she's sober, 1 hour at a time. She nods at me as if we share a club. I nod back. We do. I ride the bus to the station that serves both towns and switch lines, a poor woman's version of switching trains to throw off a tale that probably isn't there. In the window, my reflection looks like a woman who knows where she's going, because she's already there. Halfway to Selwood, the old phone vibrates a steady indignation. I let it. When I get off, the sky has gone that clear late afternoon, color that promises cold, and keeps it. Thomas spots me coming up the alley with a plastic bag of towels and a toaster under my arm. "I found you a chair," he calls down from the back stairs. "My sister left it in the basement. It's ugly in a trustworthy way, he's right. It's the kind of chair a woman could sit in for years without noticing it was part of the room, until she moved and felt a draft where it used to be." I hand him a 10 for his trouble. He tries to refuse it. I change the subject to trash day. We come to an agreement. I'll roll the cans to the curb Thursday morning before the plow piles a wall of snow into the alley. He'll tell the downstairs neighbor to leave me a path. I spend the evening putting the small place in order. 2 plates, 2 bowls, forks and knives that look like they came from a diner once, and learn to behave. I tape my list of quiet life. Items inside a cabinet door like a commandment written for one. After, the boxes are flattened and the sheets are on. I carry the fireproof box upstairs like a baby I am pretending is a toolbox. I set it in the closet behind my duffel in a stack of towels. I drape a winter coat over it because old women know how to hide things in ways nobody under 30 respects. I text David the new address and the time I prefer for the claim appointment. Late morning when the body is awake and the eyes haven't started looking for exits. He replies with the rescheduled slot. State building downtown. 2 days from now. And a gentle instruction. Arrive early. Wear something unremarkable. Bring your patience. Unremarkable is my specialty. I type back. That night, the river knocks its knuckles against the shore hard enough I can hear it from the alley. I sleep with the window cracked and let the cold talk me down. At 3 a.m, a train moaned somewhere out past the marina. And when I wake, I remember the supervisor, who used to say that the best nurses learn to listen to machines like music. She wasn't wrong. Some music keeps time for you when you've forgotten the count. The next day, simplicity earns its keep. I find a used desk and a straight-back chair at a thrift store that smells like dust and small ambitions fulfilled. I buy them because they're sturdy, not because they are pretty, and because a woman needs a place to pay bills, even when the bills are about to change shape. I carry them home one at a time, stopping on the stairs twice for the need to catch up with the us heart. I set the desk under the window, where a sliver of river shows between buildings, like proof that there's always something bigger than your story 2 blocks away. In the afternoon, David calls to practice the morning of the claim like it's a fire drill. "You'll meet me in the lobby," he says. "We'll go up together. You'll present your ID and the ticket. They'll verify the numbers against their system and the winning draw. You'll sign releases you've already reviewed. Then you'll decide, lump sum or annuity. Lump sum?" I say without pause. I know the math. I know my age. "Understood," he says. He reads phrases I'll see on paper so that when I see them, they won't look like traps. Federal withholding, state withholding, payment timeline, privacy elections, press policy. "And after, we go to the bank," he says. "We open an account in the trust's name. You take home a folder that tells you where your life lives now. Then you don't do anything dramatic for a week." "I don't do dramatic," I say. "Everyone does," he answers, not unkindly. "That's why we rehearse." At dusk, Thomas knocks on the door with 2 mugs. "I made chili," he says. "I make a lot of chili. If you say you don't like chili, we can still be friends, but it'll be complicated." I take the mug, the steam warm on my hands. We stand at the top of the stairs and look at the alley like it's a front yard. He tells me about the snowplow driver who takes the corner too fast, and the neighbors who sing on Sundays, whether or not anyone asks them to. I tell him I used to drive a car the color of a nickel that rattled like a tambourine over 55. He laughs and pats the railing. We don't trade last names. It feels like respect. The day before the claim, I walk to the library and get a card. The woman behind the desk slides it across like a handshake. "Welcome back," she says, "though I've never been there." I borrow a novel I read 30 years ago and a book about repairing small engines because it's good to know that some broken things are still worth the trouble. On my way out, the bulletin board holds a flyer for a small house a mile inland. 2 bedrooms, porch, nothing fancy. The photo's overexposed like someone took it with a camera that can't keep up with winter light. The price is a number that makes me feel cautious and then brave. I take a picture of the number with the new phone and text it to David with a note. After the claim, "If the inspection's honest," he replies, "we'll make a quiet offer through the trust. We'll ask for a long close and a short inspection period. I'll stand between you and the parade." Back at the apartment, I do laundry down in Thomas's basement. Quarters in a jar. The washers thump steady as a heart with its own ideas. The old phone sits on the dryer. Turned off, a small black rectangle that contains more ghosts than I have time to entertain. I turn the new phone to silent, too, and read the novel, which is about people who don't know what's good for them, until it's almost gone. I dog-ear a page, even though the girl I was once said that was rude. The woman I am now says life is short, and library books forgive. At 10 that night, the downstairs buzzer rattles. Thomas beats me to it. I hear his voice float up the stairwell, flat, unimpressed. "No, there's no Barbara here," he says. "Wrong address. Good night." The door closes with a sound that ends the conversation. A minute later, he texts me 2 words. "Reporters," twice. I tiptoe down and slide a thank you note under his door with a $5 gift card to the bakery I saw on the corner tucked inside. When he finds it, he calls up the stairs without opening the door. "Bribery accepted. Don't make it a habit." I tell him I won't, knowing I already have. Somewhere after midnight, I wake to the river knocking again, and remember the day my husband and I almost bought a boat. We stood on a dock holding the brochure like it was a gaudy bird we couldn't imagine keeping alive. We walked away and ate sandwiches on a curb instead, and I loved him a little more for saying, "Let's buy a better winter coat." The coat never made it past a decade. The memory did. Morning comes with a sky the color of old ice. I dress like a woman who works in a building where nobody knows her last name. I put the trust folder in my bag, the letter of instruction, the copies, my ID, a small bag of almonds because the body asks for something, while the mind is busy. I lock the fireproof box and check the door twice. On the way out, I pat the pocket where my husband's photo rides wrapped in a t-shirt. I say his name under my breath like a password, only the house and I know. The bus to State Building downtown is full of people headed toward papers that need signing, and doors that answer only to badges. I sit near the front and watch the driver work the route like a practiced dance. At each stop, people feed themselves into the day, one card swipe at a time, and the city swallows them and promises nothing, and sometimes keeps even that. David meets me in the lobby he promised. High ceilings. A plant in a pot too heavy for any one person to lift. A guard whose shoulders say he has a better sense of humor than his job allows. He hands me a plain folder and nods toward the elevators. "We go up together," he says. "We come down together. If we have to wait, we wait. No eye contact with cameras. No comment. No deviations." "Deviations aren't really my thing," I say. He glances at my coat, my hat, my shoes polished like a memory you mean to keep. That's why this is going to work. As we step into the elevator, my phone buzzes once in my pocket. I don't check it. For the first time in days, I'm not interested in what someone else wants to tell me about my life. I'm interested in the way the elevator hum feels at this height, in the way David's pen makes a quiet clicking noise when he's concentrating, in the way my heart has slowed from a sprint to a jog. The doors open. The hallway is ordinary, the best possible thing. No cameras, no balloons. Just the business of turning promises into papers, and then into other promises. In a room with a glass wall, a clerk looks up and smiles professionally, the kind of smile that knows how to recede when the moment doesn't call for it. I hand over what I brought like it's only paper. David does the talking. I do the signing. The clerk stamps and nods and says, "Congratulations, if that's the word you want." "It is," I say. "But so is thank you. We elect the lump sum. We elect privacy. We elect to be boring." The clerk hands me a receipt that carries the odd weight of a piece of paper that could change a woman more than any sermon. In the elevator down, David touches the folder with one finger like he's reminding both of us that it's real. "It'll hit the trust account in a few days," he says. "Then we do the part where we surprise the part of you that suspects this won't really happen." "Part of me will always suspect that," I say. "It's useful. It keeps me from buying a boat," he laughs, not loudly, but like a man who trusts himself to celebrate small and often. In the lobby, a woman with a microphone weaves between people like she's looking for permission to interrupt them. We give her none, and she passes us like we're furniture. On the bus back to Selwood, I take out my notebook and write at the top of a new page, the line between quiet and hiding. Underneath, I draw a line and write 2 columns of words. On the quiet side, neighbors who know my first name and not my affairs. A doctor who listens. A chair by a window. On the hiding side, lies. Locked doors against everyone. Nights listening for footsteps that never come. I study the lists until my stop climbs into view. On the walk from the bus, snow starts like a rumor. 1 flake, then a handful. Then the kind that changes the sound of the world to velvet. I think of my son and of the woman he married, and hope the heat works and the fridge holds. Milk and the electricity. Bill doesn't scare him into turning off every light except the one over the sink. I hope he stops. Spoiling for a fight with gravity. At home, Thomas swept the alley. On my stairs, he's left a note on a torn grocery bag. Trash day tomorrow. The plow guy doesn't stop for anyone. I grin despite myself and tack the note on the corkboard by the door. I make coffee and sit in the ugly, trustworthy chair and watch the snow. The river throws its shoulder into the wind, and the wind leans back, and together they make a sound like applause in another room. By afternoon, a call comes from David. Offer on the little house accepted, he says. They like the clean terms. Closing in 30 days. You can back out if it feels wrong after the inspection, but I think it's the kind of place your list had in mind. I'll bring my own toaster, I say. You already did, he answers, and I can hear his smile. We'll handle title quietly. The trust will own it. Your name doesn't have to sit on the mailbox like a target. Thank you, I say, because that's still the right word. When it's fully dark, I take out the photo of my husband and set it on the windowsill. Snow swirls in the streetlight. I tilt the picture so he can see. Look at that, Richard, I say softly. Look at that quiet. The old phone sits on the desk off. The new phone rests on the table silent. The fireproof box hums its confidence from the closet. In the morning I'll roll the trash cans to the curb and wave to the plow if he bothers to look. I'll buy a better broom. I'll call the library and ask if they need someone to restack books when the college kids go home for break. Small work. Work that fits in an old woman's hands. I pour the last of the coffee, which isn't good, but it's mine. I don't make a toast. I don't pray for forgiveness or luck or anything I can't carry in a pocket. I say thank you to a room no one else would recognize and mean it. Then I sit and let the snow edit the alley into something softer and easier to walk in, and I practice the not hiding, kind of quiet until it feels less like a performance and more like my life. Money arrived the way weather arrives, announced, charted, and then suddenly there, changing the taste of the air. David called at 10 in the morning to say the transfer had posted. By 10:04, I could feel my shoulders creeping away from my ears as if they'd been waiting all week for permission. We met at the bank. Not a new building, not a fancy one. Just the kind with carpet that tries to remember your footsteps. Woman with kind eyes and a stapler that sounded like a small verdict led us into a little glass room. Papers slid across. The table with the soft rasp of changes you can't take. Back I signed as trustee. My name in neat block letters that looked more honest than cursive ever did. We set up an account that pays me the same monthly number no matter what the headlines say, as if I still worked my shifts, and payday came like a train. Guardrails, David said, tapping the paper. They keep you from driving into ditches you can't see yet. Guardrails, I echoed and felt the good kind of corral. From there, we drove to the small house a mile inland. The inspector wore boots clean enough to trust. He crouched in the crawl space and talked about joists like he loved them. Roof in 2 years, he said. Furnace is honest. Windows could be less stubborn. Nothing fatal. Everything ordinary. I liked the way the front steps waited for a woman who carries a bag of groceries in her left hand and her keys in her right. The porch took snow like it knew the drill. On the way back, we stopped at the clinic. New patient paperwork, blood pressure cuff. A doctor who looked me in the face more than at the screen. He asked about the pills I take and the pills I avoid, and did not make a face at either. He ordered labs. We'll check your A1C, he said. And I could hear my husband making the small sound he made when he approved of. Doctors who paid attention to the machinery that held people up. I scheduled a dental, cleaning, and an eye exam, because there are parts of a woman that fail quietly until one day they don't. With the big things set in motion, the little things found me. A woman in a too-sharp suit drifted into the coffee shop, where I was learning the difference between medium and large as if she'd been poured there. She said she specialized in wealth preservation, a phrase that belongs in a museum next to advertisements. For miracle tonics, she talked about opportunities reserved for a select, few and diversified vehicles and non-correlated assets. Stirred my coffee like it had advice at the bottom. My assets are correlated to sleep, I said, and to a chair that doesn't wobble. She smiled like she didn't understand English. At your age, inflation is an enemy. At my age, enemies are a hobby I gave up, I said. Thank you for your time. I stood. She stood. She pressed a card into my hand with a thumb that promised she could make me whole if only I would admit I was broken. Dropped the card into the trash and watched it disappear under muffin wrappers like a magic trick I liked better than most. Thomas brought me a spare set of house keys he'd found at the bottom of a drawer and a story about a snowblower that ate a glove last winter. We stood on the stairs with our hands around mugs like we were auditioning for a brochure. People have been asking about you, he said, tone casual with work underneath. Neighborhood types. Who's the new lady? I told them you keep to yourself and stack your mail a little too neatly to be trouble. That's the kindest thing anyone said this month, I said. He slid a folded note across the railing. Use my address if anyone asks where you rented from. Nothing for them to find here. The generosity sat in my chest like a warm brick. I used the afternoon to buy a kettle and a better broom and a pair of boots that didn't leak. I bought a coat that fit the way sense fits a woman who has gone without it long enough to know the difference. I did not buy a television big enough to judge me. Back at the apartment, I put labels on 3 folders: health, house, quiet, and slid the right papers into the right mouths. In the folder marked quiet, I put a single sheet that sat in my hand. No revenge purchases. No revenge. Period. The first letter from my son's attorney arrived the next morning. Heavy stock as if weight could make accusation true. It came to David as we'd planned. He called before I could imagine the contents into something worse than they were. Demand to negotiate, he said, brisk as a metronome. They're using phrases like family purchase and shared understanding. They want 1/3 of everything, which is a number people pick when they haven't done any math, but want to sound reasonable. What do we do? I asked, though I'd already decided. We say no, he said. We say facts. We say you are prepared to defend yourself with documentation and witnesses, if necessary. We remind them that threats of exposure constitute harassment and we are keeping a record. Good, I said. And then we have dinner and go to bed. He laughed softly. That's the plan. We drafted a response that would have made my husband proud. Plain words, short sentences, no heat. It said the ticket was purchased by Barbara Collins in her name with her money. A separate ticket with your client's name was purchased and did not win. Mrs. Collins has retained counsel. Further contact should be professional. It read like a boundary line painted in the middle of a street. Not a wall, not a moat. Just a bright line that said, choose a side and stay there. A different kind of pressure arrived the next day. 2 women from the hospital called within an hour of each other. Voices I hadn't heard in months. The vowels softened by decades of care work. One wanted to get in on something. If I was doing anything that throws off cash, as if I'd set up a side hustle printing 20s in the basement. The other wanted a loan to float her until a settlement comes through. A settlement that has been coming through since the year they changed the scrub supplier, and we all broke out in hives. I said no to both, and felt meaner than I am, and older than I feel. After the calls, I sat on the porch of the little house and watched snow melt off the gutters into respectable drips, and told myself that no is a word you can say without becoming a villain. Sarah texted a photo of a coffee. I didn't buy her in a note. Cousin apologized. Manager put up a sign near the register. No lottery questions. Store policy, people grumbled. Then they bought gum. I sent her back a thumbs up and a picture of the kettle on my stove because some friendships are built one small proof at a time. The inspection on the house found a soft spot under the kitchen sink and a piece of wiring that looked more ambitious than legal. The seller agreed to fix both. We kept the closing, quiet by keeping it boring. Weekday, late morning, no balloons, shoes with salt lines. The trust signed. The deed changed hands. A clerk stamped and yawned. I stood on the new porch and listened to the street. Mail truck, neighbors laugh, a dog correcting a squirrel, and believed it might be possible to build a life out of sounds nobody else cared about. On move-in day, Thomas loaned me a dolly that had the word fragile stenciled on it like a joke. I rolled in a table, 2 chairs, the fireproof box, a bed that promised to remember my shape without telling me what it was. A woman from the thrift store helped for an hour and refused money with the kind of offense that is really pride. I pressed a 20 into her pocket anyway and told her to forget where it came from. She pretended to try. Around noon, someone knocked on the door like the police knock when they're sure they've got the right address. I opened it to find my daughter-in-law filling the frame, a smile that pretended to be friendly, already cracking at the corners. Michael stood behind her, eyes red, chin high, the way people hold their heads when they believe posture can lift a day. "Mom," he said, and for a moment the old wire between us hummed. "Not a good time," I said, "and not a good place." "We just want to talk," Jennifer said, palms out, voice pitched to reasonable like a radio advertisement promising lower rates. Behind her, a car idled with a man in the passenger seat holding a notepad the way a swimmer holds a float. Reporter, of course. "No," I said quietly, and the no had a whole year behind it. She tried to step forward. I put my foot against the door like a woman who has learned that hinges are your friends. "We can do this the hard way," she said. "Every way is hard if you don't listen." I said, "You brought a reporter to a conversation about family. That tells me everything I need to know." Michael's face twisted through 6 emotions in 3 seconds and landed on the one that used to make me buy him a popsicle just to see it leave. "We're scared," he said. "We made a mistake. We said things, but that money is not an apology," I said, "and it is not a time machine." I kept my voice because I didn't want to lose my respect for it. "Here are my terms," I said, and I heard David's even cadence in my own. "If you want to talk, we do it through counsel. We meet in a neutral place without cameras or ambushes. No threats, no ultimatums. We set a timer and when it buzzes, we stop. If you agree, we can try to build something. If you don't, we don't." Jennifer opened her mouth to negotiate. I closed the door until only an inch of January fit between us. "Don't come here again without calling my attorney first," I said through the gap. "Next time, the police will be the ones telling you to leave." I shut the door. My hands shook, but the rest of me held. Through the thin wood, I heard the reporter ask if there was a comment. Jennifer said something about no comment at this time, which felt like watching a woman borrow a suit she couldn't afford. Their footsteps softened down the walk. My heart learned its pace again. I called David. "You did fine," he said after I recited the exchange like a confession. "I'll send a letter, and I'll put a note on file at the station in case they test your boundaries again. We'll be firm and boring." "Boring is my favorite flavor," I said. "Mine too," he said. Underneath it, of course, his steel. The next days found their groove. I bought a toolbox because houses respect women who have them, even if the women are slow with a wrench. I learned which step creaks. I found the grocery store with the good pears and the clerk who doesn't bruise bread. On Tuesdays, I went to the clinic for labs, and on Thursdays, I walked to the library and reshelved a cart of returns until the letters lined up like soldiers. I made soup that tasted like patience and toast that tasted like memory, and I ate both at a table that complained less than I do. Then the article hit. Local woman believed to be winner, the headline said, and the photo showed the alley by Thomas's garage and a hat that could have been mine if we were playing a game of charades where the category was regrets. The story was careful enough to avoid a lawsuit. Lots of sources say, and reportedly, but it put my name in the same paragraph as the store and the day and the number. The comment section did what comment sections do. When, given a match in an unguarded haystack, Thomas slid the paper under my door with a post-it. Don't read the comments. I didn't. But the headline alone was a little parade down the street I live on. For 2 days, cars rolled past slower than they needed to, and strangers looked up at my windows like my curtains knew secrets. Took the long way to the clinic, and the longer way back and practiced breathing like a woman who was not going to let other people's excitement rearrange her lungs. David filed something official and stern on letterhead that made editors sit up straighter. The paper posted a clarification without apology. The reporter moved on to a city council scandal that had more teeth. The cars sped up again. Thomas whistled off-key on the stairs, but the fault lines stayed. Texts came that said things like, "You owe us," and "You're a thief," and "My cousin says you promised," and "The one that tried hardest will make you look bad." I turned off the old phone and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk, under a stack of envelopes like you bury a tool you no longer trust yourself to use. The new phone stayed on but quiet. I answered only what needed answering. David, the doctor, the man about the roof who could start in March if the snow cooperated with ladders. Not all attention was ugly. A neighbor knocked with a casserole that had 3 kinds of cheese, and the decency to admit it. "No reason," she said. "I bake when it snows. You looked like someone who eats." I laughed and took the dish with both hands like a sacrament. On Saturday morning, the book club from the library asked if I'd like to sit in for a discussion about a novel where no one made good choices for 400 pages. Said yes because my preferences for fiction and reality are opposites. Sarah called to say she was taking a week to see her mother. She needs help getting in and out of chairs, she said. I'm a chair expert. I told her to bring her flowers if she liked that sort of thing, and to tell her a stranger appreciates her daughter for the way she reads receipts like poetry. The second letter from Michael's attorney had sharper corners. They had witnesses, they said, friends who had heard me promise. They were willing to consider mediation, which smelled like what it was, a fishing expedition with coffee. David drafted a response that placed our proof in a row, like fence posts. They can keep writing letters, he said. We will keep telling the truth. At night, the house settled and the radiators ticked like bones remembering the day. I sat in the ugly chair and made more lists. One column read things I can fix. The other read things I can only endure. Under fix, I wrote, roof, knees maybe, fence gate, blood sugar, a sticking window. Under endure, I wrote, opinions, winter, rumor, the ache of a son who won't forgive me for not being who he needs me to be when he needs money. I underlined the last one and sat with it until my chest loosened. One morning, a woman I knew from the hospital tracked me down outside the hardware store. She wanted me to invest in a can't-miss venture that involved storage units, vending machines, and influencer branding. She said, "You owe it to your community," which is a language people remember the minute they need a loan. I told her I owe a lot to a lot, but not that. She called me a word we used to laugh at when we hit our elbows on the same IV pole and then apologized like she meant it half as much as she should. I shook her hand and watched her walk away and wished her an honest job and a coat that fit. Health came back as numbers. On a portal David would have hated but the clinic insisted on. The doctor called instead of making me stare down a login. "You're okay," he said. "We'll adjust this and this. Walk after dinner. Eat more green things. Call me if your feet tingle." I put the printout in the health folder and laced my boots and walked to the river and back and counted the number of porch lights still on after 9, the way women count things when they need to turn the brain's volume down. On a Thursday in February, I met David in his office above the coffee shop. We signed a simple, that said the trust would do what I asked, even after my hands were no longer the ones pouring the coffee. "This is the part most people skip," he said, tapping the page. "They think they have time to make decisions later. Then later shows up early." I initialed where he pointed and thought about the kindness of not leaving a mess behind. On my way out, I passed the barber holding the door for a toddler with a fresh trim. The kid ran her fingers over her head like she was petting a new animal. And I wished my own mother were still alive so I could tell her we turned out okay, in at least that one small measurement. That night, I wrote my son a letter I may never send. I kept it to one page. I said I loved him. I said I would pay for family counseling if he wanted to do the work of making a bridge where we'd both set fires. I said I would not talk about money. I said I would not live under threats. I signed it and folded it and slid it into the quiet folder like a prayer that understood it was not magic. The next morning, a woman in a windbreaker knocked with papers in her hand, a notice of intent to sue, the legal version of banging pots in the driveway. She looked embarrassed to be the courier. I took the envelope and thanked her for standing in the cold. She said, "You'd be surprised how much of my job is weather." I called David. "Timeline," he said, brisk as a metronome. "We respond within 21 days with a motion to dismiss. We attach the purchase records and the notarized statement. We ask for sanctions if they keep playing games. We do not flinch." "We do not flinch," I repeated and felt something under my ribs put its feet down. That evening, Thomas showed up with a snow shovel and a rumor. "Plow driver says we're getting 8 inches. We stood on the porch and looked at the sky like it might tip its hand." "You okay?" he asked, nodding at the envelope on the hall table. "I'm okay," I said. "Annoyed is not the same as endangered." "True," he said. "And sometimes it's quieter inside when there's more noise outside." "True," I said back. And we cleared the steps even though the snow had only started because some work is better done early. When the storm hit, it hit like it meant it. Drifts rose against the fence like they were trying to see into the yard. The city did its best, and its best, like mine, was imperfect, but determined. I made chili that wouldn't win contests, but kept a woman lit. I called my friend from the hospital, who tells jokes in a voice you have to lean toward to hear, and told her the one about the farmer who named all her cows after Beatles songs. She said, "Let it beef." And we laughed like tired women who know the value of wordplay is not in its quality, but in its persistence. On the 3rd day after the suit notice, the paper ran a small item. "Lawyer for alleged winner files response." No photo, no drama, just a quote from David that read like a weather report. My client will defend herself with facts, not speculation. I tacked it on the corkboard under Thomas's trash day note and my list of quiet life items. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a level bubble finding center. Pressure didn't stop. It learned to come in waves instead of a flood. I learned to let it break and run back out. I kept my appointments. I sharpened my shovel. I bought a lamp for the corner by the chair. I sat in the new house at night and practiced being the kind of woman who lets good things be small so they can be many. A working latch, a neighbor's wave, a page in a book that reminded me I have always preferred stories where people learn eventually, to tell the truth to themselves. One evening, Sarah texted a photo of her mother with a birthday cake and the caption, "She says, 'Tell the quiet lady thank you for not being a fool.'" I wrote back, "Tell her the quiet lady is trying." And then, because the world likes to test you the minute you think you found your balance, a letter arrived at the house addressed to the trust by. Name inside was an offer from a developer to buy my little place at a significant premium because they had plans for the block. Plans always speak in plurals. I put the letter in the fireplace I haven't lit yet and watched it sit there like a threat that hadn't learned to catch. Then I called David and said, "No." "Good," he said. "Every time you say no to a bad fit, you're saying yes to your life." I hung up, looked around the room and took inventory. Chair, lamp, table, kettle, boots by the door, lined up like they know their job. A photo of a man smiling into a light that knew exactly what to do with him. A stack of folders labeled like a promise. Outside, snow took another run at the porch, and lost. The crisis would come. I could feel it the way you feel, weather in old bones, but it would have to meet me standing on my own. Floor in a house with a working furnace and a woman beside the phone who had learned the difference between quiet and hiding. I put another log in the fireplace. I still hadn't lit just to practice the motion, and I said out loud to an empty room, "We hold the line." Then I made tea and sat where I could see the door. Not because I expected it to open, but because I liked the look of it closed. The freeze hit on a Tuesday, as ordinary as a clean plate. I learned about it at the checkout line, one hand on a loaf of rye, the other patting the pocket where the trust card lives. The clerk, a kid with a nose ring and a kind streak, ran it twice and frowned at the little screen like it had insulted her. "It says declined," she said, soft like a secret. "Try again," I said. She did. The machine stayed stubborn. I put down the bread and smiled the way women smile when they do not want to teach their face a new trick in public. "I'll be right back," I told her, and walked out with my hands empty and my chest full. David answered on the second ring. "They got an emergency order," he said before I finished. "Ex parte, temporary freeze pending a hearing. It's standard with flimsy affidavit and a judge who hasn't had lunch. I'm already drafting our response. Hearing is Thursday at 9. 2 days," I said, and felt the room tilt a degree. "Can I buy groceries?" "You can," he said, and his voice steadied the floor. "Use cash. I'll push to have personal expenses carved out by noon. We'll get this undone." I thanked him and hung up and sat on a bench outside the store, with my elbows on my knees, like a teenager who doesn't yet know how long money can teach you to bow. For a minute, the old panic found me, the kind that rattles through your ribcage when a supervisor posts a schedule with your name too close to the bottom. Then I took out my lists. In the margin of quiet, I wrote, "Freezes thaw. Go slow." In the margin of health, I wrote, "Almonds, water, breathe." I went back in, paid with cash, told the nose ring kid that machines can be dramatic, and walked home with bread under one arm and a quiet under the other. By noon, David had the carve-out. "You're fine for day-to-day," he said. "The rest waits until we're in front of a different judge who's eaten." "Thank you," I said, and meant it more than I could show. The next day, I sharpened a pencil and practiced being unafraid. I put the originals I needed in a flat folder. The notarized statement from Sarah, the transaction record, the photographs with the motel clock in the background, the lottery receipt. I added one more thing I hadn't planned to, a printout of the voicemail from my son that said, "We'll say you stole the ticket." It felt mean to carry it. It felt necessary to survive. That night, I ironed a blouse I wear to remind myself I can make a collar behave. I put almonds in a plastic bag. I slept as if sleep were a tool I could reach for in the drawer marked, "Don't be foolish." In the morning, the sky had the color of used ice. I rode the bus downtown early, sat in a lobby that smelled faintly of old coffee and decisions, and watched women in coats too thin for February pretend not to be cold. David arrived with a folder that looked heavier than mine, and a look on his face I trusted. Brisk, not brittle. "We'll keep it boring," he said. "We will let their noise be their problem." The courtroom was small and serious. The judge wore a pair of glasses she lifted to her forehead when she wanted to. Think opposing counsel had the practiced indignation of a woman who gets paid to conjure storms. She said words like constructive trust and family understanding and unjust enrichment with the confidence of someone who had learned young that big words can sometimes pass for fact. David stood and made my favorite kind of music. Quiet sentences, short and true, Your Honor, he said. "The ticket at issue bears my client's name. She purchased it with her money. She has the receipt from the store and a notarized statement from the clerk who entered the names. There is no agreement to share. There is, however, a voicemail in which the plaintiffs threaten to accuse her of theft if she declines to divide her winnings." The judge looked over the glasses. "You have the voicemail?" "We do," he said. "We also have evidence of the separate, non-winning ticket bearing the plaintiffs' name purchased at the same time." Opposing counsel rose with a hand already in the air like a traffic cop. She spoke about equity and fairness and morality, about a son who had supported an elderly mother. Here she turned in my direction like a woman gesturing grandly toward a museum exhibit. My throat warmed the way an engine does when someone's left their foot on the gas too long. I put a hand on the bag of almonds in my pocket instead of raising. Yet the judge listened the way good women listen to weather, with skepticism and patience. She let the lawyer finish her storm. Then she turned to David. "Call your witness," she said. Sarah walked in wearing her nicest shirt, which I recognized by how carefully she had tucked it into her jeans. She raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth in a voice that probably had never lied with any skill. She told the story exactly as she'd written it for me. She did not dress it up. She did not use words she hadn't earned. She said she typed my name and my son's name and printed 3 tickets, watched me put 2 in my wallet and lay 1 on the coffee table later and shook no hands that day. Besides, mine. Opposing counsel came at her with questions that wanted to turn a Tuesday into a mystery. Was she sure about the names? Could she have misread? Did she recall the exact time? Had she heard me say anything about sharing? Sarah answered like she stocked shelves. "Steady! One thing in the right place before she reaches for the next. I typed the names," she said. "I printed the tickets. I rang the sale. I looked at the clock." She paused. "Nobody said anything about sharing." When David played the voicemail, it filled the room with a voice I knew as well as my own, and wanted in that moment less. The judge didn't change expression, but she wrote something on a pad and underlined it twice. When it was over, the judge pushed the emergency order to the side, like a plate that hadn't agreed with her. "The freeze is dissolved," she said. "The plaintiffs seek equitable relief for a windfall that is not theirs. I see no credible basis for a constructive trust." She glanced at opposing counsel. "If you believe you have facts that could survive a motion to dismiss, file them. But I caution you, don't confuse family disappointment with legal entitlement." Her gavel was more of a tap than a smack. It didn't need to be louder. I let out a breath I had been holding since the checkout line, or perhaps longer. My hand found the almonds like a dog finds a familiar pocket. Outside the courtroom, David stood with his back to the wall so no one could step behind him. "We'll file to dismiss," he said, voice low. "We'll request fees if they keep pushing. You did well." "I did almost nothing," I said. "You did not make this harder," he said. "That's more than most can say." We were almost to the elevator when the hall took on that temperature you learn to notice in hospitals and Thanksgiving dinners. a crowd coming together around a point that could turn. Michael stepped into our path like a choice. Jennifer hovered 2 steps back, jaw locked, eyes scanning for angles. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked on the single syllable like a dropped plate. "Please." I looked at David. He gave me the tiniest nod that says, "You're allowed to be human for 60 seconds, but not foolish for even one." "We can talk," I said, "but not here." "Where?" he asked, and for a second the old rhythm of call and response found us. "In a counselor's office," I said, "with a clock on the wall. No money talk, no threats, just feelings and facts, and an exit at the end." Jennifer's mouth did an acrobat's flex. "You think you can dictate terms?" "I think I can state boundaries," I said, "and leave if they're not respected." She took a step like an argument. David shifted one shoe so he could see both of them, and the elevators in the same glance. "Ms. Collins," he said, calm enough to count as weather. "You heard the judge. You heard the voicemail. You are flirting with harassment. Choose your next steps carefully." She looked at him, then at me, then at the floor, where women have always found arguments that don't help anyone. Michael's eyes were wet in the way that undoes a mother, even when she's learned to use a different set of tools. "I'm not here to scream," he said. "I want—" He stopped. "What?" I asked, and I made myself keep my voice where it belonged. "Say the small version." "I want you not to leave me," he said, and all the other sentences that had been pushing behind it about money, about fairness, about what we owed, sat down like tired men. "I can't solve that with a check," I said. "I can sit in a room with you and try to make a bridge we both agreed to cross. I'll pay for the counselor. That's what I can do. I won't talk about the winnings. I won't let you talk to me like a target. That's what I won't do." He blinked hard once, twice, a semaphore of hope and habit. "Okay," he said, so quiet the elevator could have swallowed it. "Okay, I'll think." "That's a good first job," I said. The elevator opened. David and I stepped in. As the doors closed, I watched my son's face in the narrowing slice of hallway and imagined the way we used to look at each other through a car window when he was 12 and late for something I couldn't fix for him. On the sidewalk, the air cut fresh and useful. "You kept the line," David said. "I wanted to do something dramatic," I admitted. "We all do," he said. "We eat almonds instead." He peeled off toward his office. I walked to the bus with my hands in my pockets and my shoulders where they belonged. The dismissal came 2 weeks later, not with fanfare, but with a stamp that sounded like the bank stapler. Small verdicts. Important anyway, the judge's order said, with prejudice and fees. "Reserved." David called and read the short parts twice. I stood at my kitchen counter and ran water in the sink like a woman who needs the sound of a useful faucet to understand that peace is a thing you maintain, not a thing you win once and hang on the wall. I did not call a reporter. I did not post a statement. I did not send a screenshot to anyone who would congratulate me for not losing something that was mine to begin with. I wrote 2 checks, one to the clinic for a balance that insurance had shrugged at, and one to the library with a note for chairs that don't wobble. "Yours." Put both in the mailbox and raise the red flag like a quiet flare. I took the bus to see Sarah. The bell over the door did its shy celebration. She grinned when she saw me, and then looked like she couldn't decide whether to be solemn for my sake. "Judge unfroze winter," I said. She laughed. "Manager says if anyone asks me lottery questions, I get to charge $5. House policy." "That'll pay for a sandwich and a half." She slid a coffee across the counter and wouldn't take my money. "My mother says you're not a fool," she said, half proud, half amused. "I told her I wouldn't have believed you were until I watched you prove it." "I'm trying," I said. Trying is the only thing that scales. On the way home, I stopped at the fence supply and bought a new latch for the backyard gate. The old one had a way of pretending to close and then letting the wind do what it wanted. I installed the latch with the satisfaction of a woman who has finally bought the right tool after years of using the wrong one gently. The gate clicked, shut with a sound that landed in my chest like a... Yes, that night I wrote a letter to Michael I did send. It said, "I love you. I will be at the counselor's office next Tuesday at 4. If you come, we'll talk like people who intend to keep talking. If you don't, we'll try another day. I am not your enemy. I'm just a woman who won't be your answer." I mailed it and did not wait at the window. Pressure didn't disappear. It changed jobs. Letters turned into silence. Silence turned into the work of ordinary days. A roof estimate. A reminder from the dentist. A neighbor asking if I had a socket wrench in 2 minutes. I had both. The developer sent a second offer. I tore it in half and fed it to the shredder that sounds like a small, satisfied bee. I put the pieces in the bin and wheeled it to the curb for Thursday, without needing Thomas's note to remind me. When the plow came, it pushed a wet wall of snow across the alley, and I shoveled an opening wide enough for a woman to pass, without turning sideways. In March, a melt came that made the gutters sing. I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee that deserved a better review and watched water find the path of least resistance. The mail truck rattled by. The carrier lifted a hand without taking her eyes off the road. The world made no note of my victory. I preferred it that way. A week after the dismissal, I got a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry." I typed and erased 6 replies. Then I wrote a sentence that fit the space available, "Thank you." Tuesday at 4, I didn't add a heart. I didn't add a lecture. I set the phone down. That evening, I opened the fireproof box and took out the ticket for the last time. I read the numbers, the date, my name, and felt nothing I would call triumph. Felt the odd affection you have for a tool that did its job and will never be asked to do it again. I slid it back into the sleeve and returned it to the place where it belongs. Not because of the paper, but because of the reminder. Keep receipts. Keep your name where it belongs. Keep your line. I made dinner. Eggs, a heel of rye, an apple the color of old fire trucks, and ate at the table with the lamp on, and the newspaper folded to a crossword I would not finish. When I washed the plate, I used the brush instead of the sponge because it makes a more satisfying sound. I dried it and put it away, and stood in the middle of the kitchen, and for 5 full breaths, did nothing. Later, in the ugly chair that has earned its place, I wrote 2 lists. On one side, ways I could be petty. On the other, ways I could be free. Under petty, I wrote, call the paper, sue for sanctions, throw a party I don't want, buy something to spite someone who won't see it. Under free, I wrote, show up Tuesday, fix the gate, pay the clinic, learn the names of the people who plow the alley. Let quiet be a skill, not a hideout. I put a check mark beside free. Then I dug into the bag of almonds and ate 5 on purpose. Outside, the wind changed. You could hear it in the chimes somebody 2 houses down had hung, without asking the neighborhood's permission. Spring wasn't here yet, but it had sent a note ahead. In bed, I lay on my side and counted the ticks in the radiator until the room learned me again. On the dresser, the picture of my husband caught a sliver of streetlight and reflected it into the dark like a promise that is not grand and therefore easy to keep. I said goodnight to him, to the house, to the river, 2 blocks away, that kept time for me when I forgot how. We had held the line. Tomorrow was still tomorrow. I would wake and sweep the porch and be a woman who did small things right on purpose. And if the world tried again to make a parade of my name, I would do what I had done today. Step to the curb, let it pass, and go back inside to fix a latch that mattered more. The thaw didn't arrive like trumpets. It came in drips, gutters learning a new song, boots drying by doors, the street giving back what winter borrowed and kept too long. I woke before light and stood at the kitchen window with the kettle starting its quiet fuss. The porch steps wore a fringe of clear ice like lace. Somewhere 2 blocks over, the river shifted its weight and sighed. On the table lay a small stack of papers that could have been a life. Clinic follow-up notice, a scrap with Thomas's reminder about trash day, now unnecessary, a letter from the library printed on a dot matrix dinosaur that said plainly, "Thank you for the chairs." I touched that one like a woman checking her own pulse, proof that doing a small thing right will sometimes write you a note in reply. Tuesday came like we told it to. 4 o'clock, a low building that once sold vacuum cleaners now, converted to rooms where people sit on purpose. The receptionist had a sweater with elbow patches and a way of speaking softly without turning to mush. I signed in and took a seat under a clock that ticked, as if it had taken an oath to only tell the truth. Michael arrived 8 minutes late, which is to say he arrived. No jacket, hair in disarray, shoulders higher than they needed to be. He scanned the room like a passenger counting strangers. When he saw me, he did that double blink he's done since he was small, like his eyes needed to reset to be sure. The counselor was a woman about my age with the kind of posture that says she has carried heavy things and prefers to keep her hands free now. She introduced herself and established the rules, as if rules could be a gentle blanket. No yelling. 5 minutes at the end for practical next steps. Money, if we spoke about it, would be nouns, and not knives. The tissue box stayed on the table like a prop. Neither of us was determined to prove we didn't need. "Why are you here?" she asked us both. "Because I don't want to be a performance," I said, "and because I'm old enough to know a bridge won't build itself." "Because my mother is a person," Michael said, surprising both of us, I think. "And because I keep talking to her like she's a bank." We let that sit. I went first. Not to list grievances. I could have, but that road dead ends in both directions. I said I was sorry for the right things. For the nights I chose overtime over school plays. For the way grief after his father died made me quieter than a house can bear. For my habit of counting costs out loud. I did not apologize for refusing to be thrown out of a life I paid for. I did not apologize for the ticket, or the line we'd drawn together by accident and then in ink. Michael spoke, and his words came like a river that had been trying to find a channel that wouldn't drown. Anything. He spoke about panic and scarcity, about watching the price of milk climb and the heat go cold, and that particular humiliation of being an adult in a kitchen that feels like it belongs to you and doesn't. He spoke about Jennifer in phrases that sounded like he was trying to return a purchase without a receipt. He admitted without ceremony that telling me to leave hurt him more than he expected. "I expected relief," he said. I got quiet, not the good kind. When money came up, we kept it boring. That was key. No adjectives, no carousels of imagined trips. No court words we didn't own. He said, "I wanted you to save me." I said, "I can help with the kind of help that doesn't make either of us smaller." The counselor nodded at that, as if we'd stumbled into a sentence fit for a wall. At the 5-minute bell, we made a plan. Coffee in public once a week, 1 hour midday, where the daylight can see us and the temptation to dig trenches is low. No Jennifer for now. If at 4 she wanted to come 1 week, months from now, we'd talk about it first, like grown people who know how to schedule weather. He would keep seeing the counselor on his own. I would pay for that part quietly because sometimes the right form of money is the kind that makes room without taking up space. If either of us started using the word deserve, we'd pause and drink water. We walked out together and stood on the sidewalk where March had left a thin brown rim of snow like a coffee stain. "Thank you," he said, voice small and real. "For the hour." "For the hour," I said back. "We can afford another one." At home, I put a fresh page in the quiet folder. Coffee plan with days and a note underlined twice. No debates, no receipts. Beside it, I slid the letter I'd written and kept. I love you. I'll pay for counseling. I won't be a target. I marked the Tuesday with a star on a calendar that used to be blank enough to be a warning and now pleasantly looked like a life. Days formed a shape around the plan the way. Water hugs a stone and still goes where it needs to. Go mornings. Kettle stretches. A walk to the river and back. Acknowledging the neighbor with the dog that believes in mailmen as a concept, but not as individuals. A couple of afternoons a week. The library's back room. A card of returns. The small thrill of spines and alphabetical agreement. Thursdays, trash day, even if the snow pretended it could bully the bins into staying. Saturdays, a call to my friend from the hospital. Her laugh still came like a whistle through a chipped kettle, and we managed to talk about the team without pretending either of us liked them much. Sarah came back from her mother's, weak with stories about chairs and the way pots can look like helmets if you're not sleeping enough. I brought her a new thermos and she pretended. It was too much, and then didn't argue when her hand closed, around it like a tool. Mom says to tell you her knees behave better when she has something to lean on, she said. She says people are like that too. Your mother is a scientist, I said. She laughed and texted me a picture of a knitted blanket draped over a couch like a small hill. Thomas kept the alley honest. We invented a ritual where we traded small defenses against the season, as if we were neighbors on a street we'd always lived on. He left a bag of rock salt on my steps. I fixed the sticky hinge on his back gate. He passed up a ceramic lamp he didn't need. I put it on my table like it had been waiting for permission. When the plow driver started to leave a more civilized berm at the mouth of the alley, he claimed credit without shame. I flirted with his better nature, he said, and let me think he meant nothing but the words. Health made a proper column in the folder. The doctor swapped one pill for another, with the calm precision of a woman who's closed cabinets in good kitchens and bad. Walk after dinner, he said, not as punishment, as punctuation. I obeyed and learned the 5-block loop where porches told me who had company that night and whose teenager had discovered drums. The house settled around me the way old coats do, heavy enough to notice, light enough to be glad of. I learned which window likes to stick and which one opened as if pleased to be asked. I put a hook by the door for a hat I used to misplace. I bought a used truck older than most ambition and reliable in the way a dog is, eager to turn over, loud but friendly, not built for vanity. I used it to collect a second-hand lawnmower that clacked triumphantly on the first pull, and a bookshelf. A woman made in her garage with more sincerity than skill. I lined the shelf with the books my husband kept by his side of the bed, and one new one with a dedication that read simply, "For M for mercy." The author didn't mean it for me. I claimed it anyway. Spring made a show of being difficult, and then apologized with tulips. I sat on the porch and read without underlining. I fixed the back fence where a slat had taken on water and ideas. I installed a little hook inside the front door, waist high, a silly thing I'd seen once in a friend's house. Keys go here. Every time I hung them there, a small embarrassment left my life and didn't return. The second coffee with Michael felt like a miracle, until I remembered that miracles are usually just work done steadily under the hood. We talked about ordinary things like we were new to them. How the cashier with the nose ring says hello by nodding at your bread. How the river changes color depending on whose heart you're carrying around in your chest. He told me he'd started a job at the recreation center too. Mornings a week and that equipment. Maintenance was adjusting his opinions at a rate he hadn't predicted. I told him the library had a new volunteer who shelved by mood instead of by alphabet, and that I'd found a misshelved mystery sleeping next to the memoirs like it had chosen to disguise. Itself, we didn't talk about Jennifer, It was a relief and a wound. At the third coffee, he said he had moved into the spare bedroom for a while to think. At the fourth, he came in late and out of breath and said nothing about why and everything anyway. The counselor called it progress. I called it Tuesday one afternoon. When the light goaded even the stingiest of buds to try, I drove the truck north to the edge of the county and parked where the land gives up, pretending it's anything but flat. I walked along a path I knew from another life to a spot where once, years ago, we'd almost bought a boat because brochures promised the river would behave if we named it and spoke nicely. I sat on a cold bench and took out the photo of my husband and held it so the sun could find his face. "Look at that," I said, the phrase he taught me like a low prayer. "Look at that, Richard." I put him back in the wallet when the wind rose and sat there anyway, naming things. Gull, foam. A woman who laughed when her hat tried to get away. A child in a yellow coat learning that puddles can be both a lesson and a joke. There were temptations still. The developer sent a third letter, heavier than the last, scented faintly like a new car lot on opening day. The number was high enough to goose the old part of me that collected numbers, like merit badges. I set the letter under a coffee mug for 3 hours so it could learn its place, then called David. "No, thank you," he said before I finished, "which is why I continue to like paying him. You're not at the mercy of their plans. You have your own." We laughed the kind of laugh people who have survived decisions get to keep for leaner days. In May, Sarah invited me to her niece's birthday, because you're basically the reason I learned to save receipts, which is a line that would make sense only to us. Stood in a small yard watching a 5-year-old blow soap bubbles with the intensity of a surgeon. The cake was homemade in the way that matters most. Someone tried and then tried again, and the frosting told the truth about both tries. Sarah's mother pressed an apple into my hand and said, "Don't be a fool," which I believe in that family translates to, "Bless you." On the walk home, I put the apple in my pocket like a charm. It made a round bump against my thigh that I enjoyed explaining to no one. I made a few decisions in a row that felt like who I thought I was becoming, and not like any of the women I had practiced being to make a living. I set up a small fund inside the trust with a name that won't make a plaque, Neighbors Winter, to be used by the clinic and the library without signatures or speeches. I asked David to design it so even I couldn't turn it into a grand gesture later. "Guardrails," he said again, and his stapler made its tiny verdict. I bought 2 little rocking chairs for the porch, cheap enough that I didn't have to pretend they were heirlooms, and sturdy enough that they might become some. Thomas sat in one with a bowl of strawberries, and told me the plow driver's first name, told him my friend from the hospital had convinced herself she could grow tomatoes on a windowsill despite the window, facing the wrong way, and the tomatoes having opinions. We laughed at our own smallness and found it grand. Then summer arrived, the way rain sometimes does. Nothing, then buckets. The town held a street fair 2 blocks from my house. Kettle corn like wind, a singer with a guitar, who owed honest debts to better singers and loved her own attempt enough to make you like it. Kids, with chalk making maps to places their feet already knew. I stood beside the library, table where Mrs. Matrix held up a sign that said, "We forgive late fees this week because it's hot," and rang a handbell every time someone dropped a book in the bin. When she asked for a helper to carry boxes of paperbacks to a pastor's car, I said yes because I had hands. If there were people who still believed I owed them a version of myself I could not be, they stopped calling me to tell me about it. Maybe the story changed channels and I was not the kind of news that sustains a summer. Maybe folks finally got bored with the taste of me. Maybe Thomas's unconvincing insistence that no Barbara lives here worked better than either of us expected. I didn't investigate. Quiet held, not because I ducked, but because I stood still in it, until it recognized me. The counseling continued. Not every week because schedules shift and people call in sick and sometimes you need the hour more and sometimes you don't. Once a woman in the waiting room nodded at me like we belonged. To the same union, in a way we did. People who have decided to try. Over time, the hour gave us sentences we could use at home without a referee. "I'm panicking," he would say. "Can we pause?" Or I would say, "That story is old. Can we pick a newer one?" When the subject of Jennifer returned, it did so on a day I'd had a decent breakfast, and he arrived with his chin down. "She hates that I come here," he said, and looked at the tissue box as if it were a character with lines. I told him, love not suited to daylight is not a kind of love that tends gardens. He didn't throw the tissue box at me, which I chalked up as a draw. We failed sometimes. We raised our voices, each of us, once we left with the hour half done, and both of us walked in opposite directions like information fleeing a broken radio. The counselor called that relapse, not failure. Relapse, she said, is proof you're doing something difficult with your hands and not just watching someone else do it on television. We showed up the next week looking like people who had learned something about doors. In August, I took my trip, the one a younger version of me had postponed, because there was always an extra shift, and then because grief sat heavy on my suitcase, and then because the cost of gas looked like language I didn't speak. I went by train. You sit! You look out! You remember the country exists between your errands. Fields took turns being orderly. Towns practiced the art of water towers and baseball diamonds. At a stop far enough from home to count, I stepped down and inhaled a different river. A diner welcomed me with a coffee that would not pass a test, and a waitress whose left eye knew more than her right, and didn't mind it. I ate a slice of pie without researching it first. When I paid, I left $2 more than I thought I should, and didn't argue with myself in the doorway. On the way back, I wrote a list titled, What I Keep. A chair that does not wobble. A latch that says yes every time. A doctor who listens and a walk that counts as prayer. A neighbor who knocks. A handrail up the back steps I installed because I am not 25. A son who meets me in daylight and speaks in present tense. Receipts not to weaponize. To remember. Almonds in case of trial. A kettle that takes its time. The right to say no, and the unflashy joy of meaning it. I put the list in the quiet folder, and without meaning to started another titled, What I Release. A version of me who apologizes for sleeping indoors. A story that makes money apparent and people children. The belief that kindness requires me to bleed. The urge to make a parade out of a Tuesday in September. When the evenings began to smell faintly like pencils again, Thomas and I sat on the porch and watched the neighborhood sharpen for school. The air brought a small urgency, as if someone had whispered due date into it. Michael arrived with a plastic tub of soup. He handed it to me like it might break, and then all at once, like he needed it out of his hands. Made too much, he said. The oldest truth we tell to bridge a porch. We ate it with bread. I cut thick because I'm an old woman who still believes sandwiches should have opinions. We did not mention the counselor. We did not mention money. We mentioned the way the sun set like the roof line across the street. When he left, he kissed my cheek as if he'd remembered how. I stood in the doorway and did not reach for the air. When the first frost drew delicate lies on the lawn, David called to say he was closing the original file. You're boring now, he said, satisfied. If a letter comes, it will be a friend of a friend asking you to invest in a restaurant with chairs too pretty to survive. You'll say no. It will not hurt. I thanked him for the guardrails and he said, You installed them. I just handed you a drill. Sarah sent a photo of her mother's hands around a mug with steam writing a biography in the air. She captioned it, Science Continues. I replied with a picture of the ugly chair and wrote, Control Group Holding. She sent back 3 laughing faces, which is the modern equivalent of a woman's thumbs tapping a countertop to show affection. On a day cold enough to make the river spit diamonds, I carried my husband's photo to Laurelhurst Park. There, I've called it by the name I used to myself, and sat on a bench where an inscription no one notices says, "Be kind or at least be busy." Told him about the gate latch and about Sarah's thermos and Thomas's crusade against the plow, and a judge who tapped her gavel like a secret handshake with sober people, I told him. About Coffee Tuesdays and a counselor with patience that doesn't announce itself. I told him I had not bought a boat. I told him the chair was ugly and faithful and exactly my speed. Look at that, I said again, and meant the air. On the way home, I stopped at the store. The bell did its hopeful chime. The kid with the nose ring nodded at my bread. Behind the counter, a different clock counted change like it was story beads. In the corner stood a lottery machine blinking its carnival lights into the indifferent afternoon. I didn't go near it, not out of superstition, out of respect. Tools are for fixing, not for worship. I had what I needed. A receipt for bread, a plan for soup, a life I could carry. At the house, the kettle took its time. I poured water over leaves that promised nothing and delivered exactly what they promised. I sat at the table and took one last inventory like a woman does before she leaves a room for a while. Chair, lamp, books, a porch with 2 rocking chairs and a handrail that will serve the next woman, a folder labeled quiet and another labeled health and a third labeled house, all heavy enough to be real and light enough that I can pick them up with one hand while I hold a door, with the other. A front gate that closes with a click that lands in the chest, a list on a nail behind a cabinet door that begins no revenge, purchases and now reads like an old joke I keep telling myself because it still works. A son who texts Tuesday and lets the question marks stand for hope, not leverage neighbors who wave. A library that forgives late fees because it is hot or because life is complicated. A lawyer whose stapler says, Amen. A clerk who writes for Mrs. C on an envelope and means it. A picture in a frame. A key on a hook at a height I can reach without thinking. The river, the sound it makes when wind argues and then negotiates. I took my notebook, the one that once upon a time that wasn't that long ago, I'd used to make lists that were mostly about surviving other people's plans, and started a new page at the back. The title, If I'm Lucky. Under it, the same coffee tomorrow. A call that doesn't demand, only asks what's for dinner. A day with nothing to fix, and the willingness to find something small anyway. A winter with neighbors' porches lit. A life so boring it sparkles. The light went soft. The kettle cooled. The quiet sat on the chair across from me like a friend who doesn't mind if you don't talk. I lifted my mug and without a toast drank. Then I set the mug down on the letter from the developer until the ring, made by the clay, taught the paper a little humility. Dropped the letter in the bin with peelings and a newspaper that had mistaken itself for history. When I turned off the kitchen light, the house held its breath and then resumed as houses do. In the doorway to the hall, the latch whispered, yes. I said good night to the picture, to the list, to the hook by the door. I said good night to the river, to the street, to the people I had chosen, and the ones who had chosen me back in their fashion. I said good night to the woman I had been, and the woman I was practicing being. She looked back, less surprised than before. I slept as if sleep were something I could afford, and intended to keep paying for on time, in full, without drama. In the morning, well, you can guess. Kettle, shoes. The door closing behind me with that click that never gets old. The world unremarkable, and therefore perfect, waiting for me to step into it one boring step at a time. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.